Last night, the tomato was still hanging on the vine, smooth, heavy, and almost ready to pick. This morning, one large bite was missing. The corn beside it had been pulled open at the husk, and every ripe strawberry in the nearest bed had disappeared. 3 damaged crops can look like one problem, but the clues may point to 3 completely different visitors. Was it a bird, a squirrel, or a chipmunk? And more importantly, which crop should you protect before the next visit? In this garden, the goal is not to declare war on wildlife. Birds, squirrels, and chipmunks are looking for food and water. Your job is to make the ripening food in your garden harder to reach, easier for you to harvest, and less likely to be discovered at the most vulnerable moment. Over the next 15 crops, we are going to follow the clues they leave behind, compare the damage they cause, and decide whether each plant needs a net, a cage, an individual bag, or an earlier harvest. But before we protect a single plant, we need to learn how to read the scene the thief left behind. One bite is not enough evidence. A hole in a tomato does not automatically prove a bird did it. A missing berry does not automatically prove a squirrel carried it away. A small hole beside a peanut plant does not automatically prove a chipmunk is responsible. Several animals can leave similar damage, and insects, raccoons, groundhogs, mice, or other visitors may sometimes create clues that look almost identical. Start with the fruit itself. Is it attached to the plant, lying underneath it, or completely gone? A fruit that remains on the vine with several small punctures suggests a different kind of visit from a fruit that has been torn off and carried away. Then, look at the height of the damage. Is it on the upper side of the fruit, where a bird could land or reach from above? Is it low to the ground, beside a path hidden under mulch? Is it near a fence, branch, trellis, railing, or tree trunk that gives a climbing animal an easy route? Next, look at the edge of the damage. A pecked surface may show narrow punctures or small scooped areas. A gnawed surface may look wider, rougher, or more deeply removed. Do not depend on that clue alone. Look at the stem. Is the stem still attached while the fruit is gone? Has the entire cluster been pulled sideways? Is a branch bent, stripped, or broken? A dramatic bite may get your attention, but a missing stem or bent branch may tell you far more. Now, look below the plant. Search for pieces of skin, hull, husk, seed, or fruit. Check whether mulch has been pushed aside. Look for freshly disturbed soil, a narrow travel path, droppings, tracks, or a new gap under the barrier. If you use a camera, even a short recording can settle a mystery that damage alone cannot. If you do not have a camera, the second clue is still your best guide. Then ask one final question. How did the visitor reach the crop? Birds often approach from above, from a nearby branch, or by landing directly on a plant or support. Squirrels can climb, leap, pull, chew, and use fences or trellises as bridges. Chipmunks usually stay closer to cover and can take advantage of small openings near the ground. These are tendencies, not guarantees. The useful part is not memorizing a perfect rule. The useful part is noticing the route that is easiest in your own garden. This is why a loose net can create false confidence. From a distance, the plant looks protected. Up close, the bottom may be open, the fruit may be touching the mesh, or the entire cover may be resting directly on the crop. A bird can reach through. A squirrel may climb onto it. A chipmunk may walk underneath. The protection is only as good as the weakest opening. Keep that idea in mind as we begin with the crops that can disappear so cleanly that the missing fruit becomes the clue. Berries are small, colorful, soft, and often produced in waves. They can be taken one at a time, making the damage easy to miss until a large part of the harvest is gone. Strawberries are usually the first place many gardeners notice this problem. In the evening, several berries may be red enough to pick the next morning. When morning comes, the fruit is missing, but a green cap or short stem may still be hanging above the leaves. Because strawberries sit low, the thief may approach from almost any direction. Birds can land beside the bed or hop beneath open netting. Chipmunks can move along the edge of a raised bed, under foliage, or through a small opening near the soil. Squirrels may pull fruit from the plant and leave little more than a disturbed cluster of leaves. Begin by checking whether the red fruit alone is gone, while greener berries remain. That tells you the visitor is responding to ripeness, but it does not identify the animal. Look for crushed leaves, pulled stems, small pieces of berry, or a repeated root along the bed. If the damage is concentrated on fruit near the outer edge, access may be more important than the type of bite. The most common protection mistake with strawberries is laying loose netting directly over the plants. The berries and leaves push against the mesh, so a bird can reach the fruit through it. Loose edges also create entrances, and slack netting may be more likely to entangle wildlife. A better approach is a low frame that holds the mesh away from the fruit. Secure the entire perimeter, not only the corners, and create an opening you can use without removing the whole cover. If harvesting becomes difficult, the cover will eventually be left open, and the system will fail when the berries are most attractive. Harvesting frequently is part of the defense. A ripe strawberry left outside for another full day adds exposure without always adding enough benefit to justify the risk. Check beneath the leaves, because berries hidden from your view may still be easy for an animal to smell or reach. Remove damaged fruit and fallen pieces so they do not become an invitation to return to the same spot. Blueberries create a different challenge. Instead of a low mat of leaves, you may have an entire bush carrying dozens or hundreds of berries that ripen gradually. The first few berries turn blue, while most of the crop is still green. That early color change can become a signal to birds long before you are ready to harvest the whole bush. If you wait until many berries are missing, the visitors may already include the bush in their daily route. With blueberries, protecting individual berries is rarely practical. Protect the bush or the entire row. The frame needs enough space so the fruiting branches do not press into the net. A berry touching the mesh is still within reach. If the cover collapses inward after rain or wind, restore the space between the net and the crop. Close the bottom carefully, especially near trunks and support posts, where irregular gaps often remain. Do not forget access for yourself. Blueberries may require repeated picking over several days or weeks, depending on the plant and conditions. A cover that takes too long to open encourages you to delay harvesting or leave it unsecured. A simple flap, clipped opening, or lightweight framed panel can make regular picking much easier. After every harvest, walk the perimeter once. A gap that looks small to you may be the exact opening a persistent visitor needs. The clue around blueberries is often not a damaged berry, but an uneven pattern of disappearance. You may notice the most exposed clusters becoming empty first. You may find pedicels where ripe berries were attached, while green berries remain untouched. You may see activity concentrated on the side facing a fence or tree. That pattern helps you decide where the barrier is weakest. Raspberries make the investigation more complicated because ripe fruit naturally releases from its central core. A ripe raspberry may come away cleanly when you pick it, and a stolen berry can leave a similar empty receptacle. First, look below the canes. If fruit has fallen, you may find soft berries on the ground. If the ripe fruit has been removed from exposed positions while shaded fruit remains, an animal is more likely. The structure of raspberry canes also matters. Long canes can lean against a fence, arch outside a net, or form a bridge through the top of a cage. A squirrel does not need to enter at ground level if a cane reaches an accessible support. Birds may perch on the trellis itself. Before adding more netting, inspect the entire shape of the planting. Tie wandering canes inward. Keep the fruiting area inside the protected space, and trim only where appropriate for the plant and season. A frame around raspberries should allow air movement and harvesting access. Do not wrap mesh tightly around thorny or rigid canes. Contact can tear the material, trap new growth, and create openings. Keep the barrier outside the fruiting zone. As with blueberries, regular harvesting reduces the amount of ripe fruit available at any one time. The longer a soft raspberry remains on the cane, the more likely it is to fall, spoil, or attract attention. Blackberries may look better defended because many varieties have thorns, but thorns do not stop a bird from landing nearby, and they do not prevent a squirrel from reaching from a support. The dark fruit also stands out sharply when it ripens. A cluster can be full one day and noticeably thinner the next. Look at how the fruit disappears. Are only the darkest berries missing? Are several berries removed from the same outward-facing cluster? Has a cane been pulled down or shifted? If the damage is concentrated near the top of the planting, a bird or climbing visitor may be using the trellis. If it begins near the bottom or outside edge, investigate low access and nearby cover. Netting blackberries requires extra care. Thorns and stiff canes can catch the mesh, creating both damage and a difficult removal problem. Build enough clearance that wind does not repeatedly rub the net against the plant. Keep the top supported so it does not sag onto fruit. Secure the base, but make the harvest entrance obvious and easy to close. After picking, check that no cane is holding the opening apart. These 4 berry crops teach an important lesson. When a fruit disappears completely, the empty stem, the height of the missing fruit, and the root into the planting become more useful than the bite you never saw. They also show why protection should begin when the first berries start changing color. Not after the easiest fruit has already been taken, but the next group leaves much more visible evidence. Tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, figs, and grapes are often found still attached, partly eaten, punctured, or pulled out of position. That can feel helpful because there is finally a bite to examine. It can also be misleading because gardeners often blame the first animal they see without checking the rest of the scene. A large tomato with one missing section is one of the most frustrating sights in a summer garden. The fruit may have been only hours away from your planned harvest. The damaged area may be deep enough to ruin it, yet most of the tomato remains untouched. This often leads to the question gardeners ask with the most confidence and the least evidence. Was it the squirrel? A squirrel is certainly one possible visitor. Squirrels can climb cages, travel along fences, and reach fruit from above. They may bite into a tomato and leave after taking only a small amount. Birds may also puncture or open soft fruit, especially where the surface is exposed. Other animals and insects can create damage that overlaps with both. The tomato alone rarely solves the case. Start with the position of the bite. Damage on the upper shoulder of a tomato may be easier for a bird to reach from a cage or stem. Damage on the side facing a fence may point toward a climbing route. Damage low on the plant, particularly near dense mulch or ground cover, may suggest a visitor approaching from below. Then check whether the fruit is still firmly attached. A tomato, hanging normally with a localized puncture, tells a different story from a fruit twisted sideways with a stretched or broken stem. Look at neighboring fruit. Has only the reddest tomato been touched? Are several fruits marked at the same height? Is the damage limited to the outside row? A pattern is more reliable than one dramatic example. Also check whether your plant is creating its own access problem. A branch may have grown through the cage. A heavy cluster may be resting against the net. A tomato may be hanging outside the protected area, even though the main plant appears enclosed. For tomatoes, one of the most useful defenses is timing. A tomato does not always need to remain outside until it reaches its final deep color. Once it has reached physiological maturity and begun the normal color change associated with the breaker stage, many tomatoes can continue ripening indoors. That does not mean picking hard, immature green fruit as a routine solution. It means recognizing when a mature tomato has entered a stage at which leaving it exposed may add more risk than quality. When wildlife pressure is high, inspect tomatoes daily. Prioritize fruit that has started changing color, fruit near the outside of the cage, and fruit close to a known access route. Bring suitable fruit inside and let it finish in a protected place. Remove severely damaged tomatoes rather than allowing them to soften on the vine. The scent and exposed flesh may encourage repeated visits or attract insects. A common mistake is responding to one bitten tomato by placing a small bag or piece of mesh only around that fruit. The visitor may simply move to the next tomato. Think in terms of the ripening zone, not the single damaged fruit. If several fruits are approaching the same stage, protect or harvest the group. Cherry tomatoes create quieter losses. A large tomato announces damage with one obvious wound. Cherry tomatoes may disappear, one or two at a time. The plant still looks productive, so the gardener does not notice how much has been lost until entire sections of a truss are empty. The clues are in the cluster. Look for clean gaps where ripe fruit should be, stretched stems, or a truss pulled out of its natural position. Birds may take exposed fruit from the outer canopy. A squirrel may disturb more of the cluster while reaching or pulling. Small fruit may also fall naturally, so inspect the ground before assuming every empty stem represents theft. Because cherry tomatoes ripen quickly and repeatedly, frequent harvesting is often more useful than trying to protect each individual fruit. Pick mature fruit as it colors. Keep clusters supported inside the cage or net. Tie sprawling stems inward so the plant does not present ripe fruit beyond the barrier. If you use netting, maintain space between the mesh and the tomatoes. A cluster pressed against a net is almost the same as an uncovered cluster. Do not make the protection so complicated that you stop harvesting. Cherry tomato plants can become dense, and a tightly wrapped barrier may hide damaged fruit. Reduce your ability to inspect the plant and make closing the cover difficult. A framed enclosure with a clear opening is easier to maintain than loose material tangled through the stems. The difference between large tomatoes and cherry tomatoes is not merely fruit size. Large tomatoes create a painful, visible loss. Cherry tomatoes create a slow leak in the harvest. That means the defense must focus on daily observation, keeping fruit inside the barrier, and collecting ripe fruit before small losses become a pattern. Figs change the timing problem again. A fig can spend days looking almost ready, then soften rapidly as it reaches its best eating stage. The window between not ready and extremely attractive can feel very short. Birds may peck softening fruit. Squirrels may take an entire fig or leave part of it behind. Ants, beetles, and other visitors may also enter damaged or overripe fruit, which can make the original cause difficult to identify. Do not judge a fig only by color. Varieties differ, and color alone may not tell you whether a fruit is ready. Watch for the normal signs of ripening for your tree, such as softening, a change in how the fruit hangs, and other variety-appropriate cues. The important point for wildlife protection is to check more often as the fruit approaches that stage. If one fig is damaged, inspect the fruit around it. A tree often carries figs at several stages. The most advanced fruit should receive attention first. If only a few figs are especially valuable, individual breathable bags can be practical. The bag must allow air movement, must not hold water against the fruit, and must be secured without constricting the stem. It also needs enough space that the material is not pressed tightly against the fig. Bagging is not maintenance-free. Check the fruit through or inside the bag. Make sure moisture is not collecting. Confirm that the tie has not tightened as the fruit or stem changes. A damaged bag, loose opening, or fruit pressing against the material may reduce the protection. For a larger tree with many figs, bagging every fruit may be unrealistic. In that case, prioritize the first ripening crop, the branches closest to a fence or roof, and fruit within easy reach of known travel routes. Harvest promptly when the fruit is ready. A fig left to become overly soft is more vulnerable to wildlife, insects, splitting, and spoilage. The clues around figs include more than a bite. Look for the entire stem where a fruit was removed, sticky residue, fruit fragments under the tree, and branches pulled out of position. A bird may damage fruit while leaving it attached. A climbing animal may remove it or disturb the branch. Again, the second clue matters. Grapes present a choice that many other crops do not. Protect each cluster or protect the entire vine. On a small vine, with a limited number of clusters, breathable cluster bags can create a precise barrier. On a large arbor or long trellis, a properly framed net around the fruiting area may be more realistic. A grape cluster can lose a few berries without immediately looking ruined. Birds may work from the outside of the cluster, taking or puncturing exposed berries. A squirrel or other climbing visitor may pull harder, shift the cluster, or disturb the cane. Wasps and other insects may enter berries that are already split or damaged, adding another layer to the mystery. Begin with the cluster structure. Are berries missing from the exposed side? Are the remaining stems clean? Has the cluster been moved? Is the damage concentrated near the edge of the canopy or near a support that serves as a bridge? Then inspect the surrounding vine. A long cane touching a fence can bypass an otherwise good barrier. When using cluster bags, choose a material that breathes and provides room around the fruit. Do not cinch the bag so tightly that it damages the stem. Do not allow the bag to hold rain or irrigation water. Check the cluster periodically for rot, insects, or pressure against the material. Protection that prevents observation can allow another problem to develop unnoticed. When netting an entire vine, the same rule applies as with berries. Keep the mesh away from the fruit. If clusters touch the net, birds may reach through. Secure the bottom and the ends of the protected section. Make the opening easy to close after harvesting. A large grape enclosure can look complete, while one corner near a post remains open. Tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, figs, and grapes all teach us to balance ripeness with exposure. They also show why visible bite marks are not as conclusive as they seem. A peck, a gnaw, and a tear can overlap. At this point in the investigation, the most useful question changes. Instead of asking only what the animal did to the fruit, ask how it reached the fruit in the first place. Look up, then look down. Is there a branch above the enclosure? Is a trellis connected to a fence? Does the cage stop several inches above the soil? Has mulch created a concealed path under the edge? Is the fruit itself touching the barrier? The root determines the defense. A perfect roof does nothing when the visitor walks through an open door at ground level. A tightly closed bottom does little if a cane extends over the top. A strong cage may still fail if the fruit hangs through the wire. The next 5 crops make that lesson impossible to ignore, because watermelons, cantaloupes, peas, green beans, and peanuts bring the investigation closer to the soil. A watermelon can look almost impossible to steal. It is large, heavy, and attached to a vine that spreads across the bed. Yet size does not equal safety. The fruit rests at ground level, often under leaves, where damage can begin on the side you do not see during a quick walk through the garden. When inspecting a watermelon, do not look only at the top. Gently examine the side facing the soil and the area where the fruit touches mulch, a board, or a support. Look for scraped rind, shallow gnawing, a deeper opening, or disturbed soil nearby. Check the vine as well. Has it been pulled? Is there a fresh path through the leaves? Has an animal repeatedly entered from the same corner of the bed? A soft net draped over a watermelon rarely addresses the real root. It can rest directly on the rind, trap leaves, or leave the entire ground-level perimeter open. A low, stronger enclosure around the fruiting area may be more useful where squirrels or chipmunks are suspected. The enclosure must allow room for vine growth and must not press against the fruit. It also should not create a damp pocket with poor air circulation. If you protect individual melons, remember that the vine still needs space and the fruit still needs inspection. Do not build a barrier that makes it impossible to monitor maturity, rot, or insect damage. Wildlife protection should not hide the crop from the gardener. Cantaloupe has many of the same access problems, but adds another signal: aroma. As the fruit matures, its scent can become more noticeable. The rind and stem area also change as harvest approaches. Those changes help the gardener, but they can make the fruit more attractive to visitors. The temptation is to harvest immediately after any sign of wildlife activity. That can save a mature melon, but harvesting too early can sacrifice quality, because melons do not all continue ripening in the same way after picking. Use the normal maturity indicators for the variety you are growing. The wildlife strategy begins with knowing when the fruit is genuinely close, not simply large. Inspect the lowest and most concealed side of the cantaloupe. Look for a small opening, scrape, or softened area. Check whether the damage is associated with a root under foliage. A cage that blocks ground access may be more useful than a cover that only shades the top. If the fruit is supported off the soil, make sure the support itself does not create a step or platform leading over the barrier. Watermelons and cantaloupes show why the ground matters. Peas show why the support above the ground matters just as much. A pea trellis is designed to help vines climb. Unfortunately, it can also function as a ladder or landing structure. Birds may perch on the top and reach pods or tender shoots. Squirrels can use nearby fences, rails, or trellises as connected routes. Chipmunks may remain near the lower foliage and reach pods close to the soil. The evidence may include a pod with part of the peas removed, a missing pod with a short stem left behind, clipped shoots, or a vine pulled away from its support. But wind, plant breakage, insects, and normal harvest activity can confuse the scene. Look for a pattern. Are the highest pods affected? Are the lowest pods disappearing? Is one end of the row more exposed? If the planting is small, a framed net enclosure can work, provided it does not rest directly on the vines. Close the bottom and the ends. If the trellis continues outside the enclosure, the visitor may simply travel along it. A barrier around the foliage is less useful if the supporting structure crosses the barrier. Harvest pea pods regularly. Leaving mature pods on the vine increases the period during which they are available, and it can also slow production depending on how the crop is being grown and harvested. A simple, accessible enclosure matters because peas may need frequent picking. If opening the net requires untangling clips and lifting heavy material each time, it will eventually be left unsecured. Green beans create two different cases. Bush beans stay low and form a dense canopy near the soil. Pole beans climb high and spread across a trellis. Treating them as the same crop leads to the wrong kind of protection. With bush beans, inspect the outer edge and the area beneath the leaves. Pods may be removed cleanly, partially eaten, or pulled so that the plant is bent. A low cage or framed cover can protect the row, but the base must be closed. The enclosure also needs enough width that pods do not grow through the mesh. Any pod hanging outside is an easy target. With pole beans, study the entire trellis. Does it touch a fence? Is the top open? Do vines extend beyond the net? A squirrel may never need to enter the lower enclosure if it can approach from above. Birds may perch on the structure. The solution may require protecting the fruiting section of the trellis, rather than wrapping only the base. For both types, frequent picking is essential. Bean pods can hide under leaves, and mist pods remain available longer. Make the barrier easy to open and close. A secure enclosure that prevents you from harvesting is not a successful design. Peanuts create the most surprising ground-level mystery in this list, because the valuable part of the crop develops below the surface. The foliage can look healthy, while the soil around the plant tells a completely different story. Peanut plants flower above ground, then their pegs grow downward into the soil, where pods develop. That means any barrier must respect the way the plant uses the surrounding soil. You cannot simply place a tight floor under the plant after growth is underway without considering the crop's development. Watch for freshly disturbed soil, narrow holes, mulch moved away from the base, or repeated digging in the row. Squirrels, chipmunks, mice, and other animals may investigate loose soil or seek seeds and pods. Do not label every hole a chipmunk hole. Compare its size, location, and timing with other evidence, and use a camera when the losses continue without a clear explanation. A sturdy low perimeter or appropriately installed hardware cloth may be useful in some situations, especially around a defined bed, but it must be planned so it does not block the crop's normal growth. The design needs to stop access from the side and, where appropriate, discourage digging, while still allowing water, air, and your own hands to reach the bed. Do not focus only on leaves. Walk around the entire peanut planting and look at the soil after irrigation, rain, or a night of activity. A new hole or displaced mulch may be the first sign that the harvest below is being investigated. A healthy-looking canopy does not prove the underground crop is untouched. These 5 crops reveal the weakness of one-size-fits-all advice. Melons need protection around a large fruit at soil level. Peas and pole beans may need their climbing route enclosed. Bush beans need a low perimeter that stays clear of pods. Peanuts require attention to the soil itself. The solution is not simply more netting. It is closing the route the actual visitor is using. The final 2 crops return us above ground, but they become most vulnerable almost at the finish line. Sweet corn and edible sunflower seeds can appear protected by their own husks or seed structures. That natural covering can hide damage until the harvest is already compromised. Sweet corn is a long investment. The stalk grows, tassels appear, silks emerge, and ears slowly fill. Because the ear is wrapped in husk, a quick glance may suggest everything is fine. Then you notice the silk disturbed, the husk pulled down, or the tip of the ear exposed. Birds may feed where kernels are accessible. Squirrels can climb stalks, pull at husks, or reach ears from nearby structures. Raccoons and other animals can also cause severe corn damage, so do not assume every opened ear belongs to one of the three visitors in the title. Look at the stalks. Are they bent or pushed over? Is the husk peeled while the stalk remains upright? Are kernels eaten only at the exposed tip? Are there tracks or larger areas of disturbance? Check corn as it approaches maturity. Examine the ears, not only the height and color of the stalk. A plant can remain standing while the ear has already been opened. Protecting a small block of corn with a sturdy enclosure may be possible, but the barrier must match the likely visitor. A light bird net may reduce bird access and still do little against an animal that can climb, push, or chew. Harvest timing matters. Learn the normal maturity signs for the variety you planted and the conditions in your garden. Do not leave a mature ear outside simply because the stalk still looks green and impressive. At the same time, do not harvest immature corn only out of fear. The defense is a combination of observation, correct maturity, judgment, and physical exclusion where practical. Edible sunflower seeds create an even more visible invitation. As the head matures, the seeds are arranged in a broad surface that birds can access repeatedly. A gardener may wait for the head to dry completely outdoors, only to discover that the outer seeds, or the most accessible sections, have already been removed. Inspect the whole head, including the edges and the side that faces away from your usual viewing angle. Missing seeds may begin in small patches. Birds can return again and again, taking enough each time that the loss is gradual. Squirrels may also climb or pull at the head, especially if the stem or a nearby support offers access. A breathable mesh bag or other suitable protective cover can help shield the seed head. A sealed plastic bag can trap moisture and create conditions that damage the crop. The cover should allow air movement, should not collect water, and should be secured without cutting into the stem. Check beneath the cover. Make sure the head is drying normally and that insects, moisture, or mold are not developing unnoticed. If the seed head has reached an appropriate stage, it may be possible to cut it and complete drying in a protected, well-ventilated location. The exact timing depends on the sunflower and conditions, so use the plant's real maturity signs rather than an invented number of days. Corn and sunflower seeds teach the same painful lesson. The crop can be most vulnerable when it looks almost finished. The last stage is not a time to stop inspecting. It is the time to shorten the interval between checks and decide whether the harvest should remain outside. Now all 15 crops are on the table. The next step is to choose a defense without repeating the same advice everywhere. There are 4 main options: net the plant or row, build a stronger cage, bag individual fruit or seed heads, or harvest slightly earlier. The best choice depends on the crop, the root, and the evidence. Use netting when the main challenge is protecting many small fruits or pods across a bush, row, or trellis. Blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, some strawberries, peas and beans may fit this approach, but the net needs a frame. It needs clearance from the crop. It needs a closed perimeter. It needs a safe, simple entrance for harvesting. And it needs regular inspection, so birds or other wildlife do not become trapped. Netting is not automatically a squirrel barrier. A squirrel may climb onto it, pull it, or chew weak material. If the damage suggests a stronger, persistent ground or climbing visitor, move to a cage or more rigid barrier. A cage is useful when the root is physical and forceful. Under the edge, through a low opening, along a trellis, or directly toward a ground-level fruit. Melons, peanuts, low berries, or repeatedly attacked beds may need a stronger enclosure. The cage must close the lower root, but it should not crush vines, block normal crop development, or prevent you from inspecting and harvesting. The strongest material in the store is not automatically the best defense. A cage that is too small can damage the plant. A heavy enclosure that cannot be opened may be left in place until fruit becomes overripe. A rigid wall with an open top may fail against a climber. Design around the visitor's route, not around the appearance of strength. Individual bags work when the crop is concentrated and valuable. Grape clusters, selected figs, and sunflower heads are good examples. A bag saves material and keeps the rest of the plant accessible. It also demands maintenance. Use breathable material. Leave room around the crop. Avoid constricting the stem. Check for moisture and insects. Replace damaged bags and close them carefully after inspection. Harvesting slightly earlier is the fourth option, and it is often misunderstood. It does not mean taking immature produce simply to beat wildlife. It means recognizing when a crop has reached a stage at which it can be harvested without losing the qualities you are growing it for. Tomatoes that have begun normal ripening may finish indoors. A ripe fig should not be left for an extra day simply because you plan to pick it tomorrow. Mature beans, peas, corn, berries, and melons should be checked often and harvested according to their actual readiness. Every crop has different post-harvest behavior. Do not assume a cantaloupe, watermelon, tomato, fig, and ear of corn will all improve after being picked early. Learn the maturity signals for each one. Early harvest is a precise timing tool, not a universal escape plan. If you cannot protect the whole garden, use a priority system. First, protect the crop that has already been attacked. A visitor that found food once may return to the same area. Second, protect fruit that is changing color, softening, filling, or otherwise approaching maturity. Third, protect crops with only a few valuable fruits or clusters. Fourth, inspect plants beside fences, trees, walls, rails, and dense ground cover. Finally, prioritize crops that cannot be replaced before the season changes. The order may shift in your garden. A single fig tree with 6 nearly ripe fruits may deserve attention before a large patch of beans. A sunflower head full of mature seed may become more urgent than green tomatoes. The system is flexible because it follows risk, value, and timing. Deterrence can be part of the plan, but do not depend on a motionless object forever. Birds and mammals may become accustomed to a fake owl, reflective item, sound, or scent that never changes and never presents a real consequence. Move deterrence, combine them with physical barriers, and judge them by actual new damage rather than by how impressive they look from the house. Also, reduce easy rewards. Pick fallen fruit. Remove damaged produce when appropriate. Clean spilled birdseed or pet food near the garden. Secure compost ingredients that attract animals. These steps will not make wildlife disappear, but they can reduce the reasons for repeated visits near your crops. Before you finish the inspection, it helps to review what each of the 3 main suspects tends to reveal. Think of this as a comparison, not a set of absolute rules. When birds are involved, the damage often begins on exposed fruit, upper clusters, or seed heads that can be reached from a perch or landing point. You may see punctures, small missing sections, or repeated losses from the most visible side of a bush. Blueberries and sunflower seeds can disappear gradually as birds return. Grapes and tomatoes may show pecked areas while the fruit remains attached. The second clue may be a nearby fence, wire, branch, cage top, or trellis where a bird can land before feeding. The response to suspected bird pressure is usually to create distance. A net resting on the crop does not create distance. A framed net does. Keep the mesh away from berries, pods, and fruit. Close the bottom. Remove slack sections. Check that no bird is inside before sealing the opening. Inspect the system often, because a safe barrier is one that excludes wildlife without creating an entanglement hazard. When squirrels are involved, the scene may show more force. A branch may be pulled down. A cluster may be twisted. A husk may be opened. Fruit may have a broad bite or may disappear entirely. But squirrels are not the only animals capable of these signs. The stronger clue is often the root, a fence beside the tomatoes, a a tree limb over the berries, a trellis connected to a railing, or a cage top sturdy enough to become a platform. The response to suspected squirrel pressure is usually to remove the bridge or strengthen the full enclosure. Trim or redirect only where appropriate for the plant. Move containers away from launch points when possible, and keep fruit from extending through the barrier. Do not assume a light net will stop an animal that can climb onto it. A rigid cage may be needed, but it still must include the top, sides, and lower openings that matter in your setting. When chipmunks are involved, investigate the lower layer of the garden. Look beneath foliage, beside walls, along bed edges, and under loose barriers. Small openings that appear insignificant can connect directly to protected fruit. Strawberries, bush beans, melons, and peanuts can all bring your attention toward the soil. Disturbed mulch or a repeated low pathway may be more informative than the fruit damage itself. The response to suspected chipmunk pressure is to close small ground-level access points while respecting plant growth and drainage. Check where frames meet uneven soil. Secure corners. Watch for digging beside a barrier rather than only through it. A low cage that is open underneath may look complete from standing height and remain easy to enter. Now, compare these suspects with the crop. A high blueberry cluster with small repeated losses suggests a different route from a strawberry disappearing under dense leaves. An opened corn husk suggests a different level of force from a punctured grape. A hole beside peanuts deserves a different response from a tomato touching the top of a cage. The animal matters, but the combination of crop, height, damage, and root matters more. This comparison also keeps you from wasting money. If birds are reaching berries through mesh that touches the fruit, replacing the mesh with a heavier material may not solve the spacing problem. If a squirrel is entering over the top of a low cage, adding clips along the bottom may not solve the open roof. If a chipmunk is using a corner gap, covering the entire plant with another loose layer may only hide the entrance. Change one weakness at a time, then look for fresh evidence. Close the low gap, pull the net away from the fruit, disconnect the trellis from the fence root, harvest the ripe cluster. The next morning, compare the scene. If damage stops in one area but continues in another, you have learned something useful about access. And remember that more than one visitor may be active. Birds can take berries during the day while a ground-level animal investigates the same bed later. A squirrel may open fruit that insects use afterward. The final damage may record several stages, not one event. That is another reason to avoid an instant conclusion based on a single mark. The most successful protection plan is not built around certainty. It is built around observation and adjustment. You form the best explanation available, block the most likely route, and check whether the evidence changes. That is how a frustrating mystery becomes a manageable routine. Most importantly, inspect your barriers as carefully as you inspect your plants. A net can tear, a clip can open, soil can wash away under a frame, a vine can grow through the top, a branch can sag against the mesh. The garden changes every day, so the protection must be adjusted with it. A useful routine takes only a deliberate walk through the garden. Begin with the plants closest to harvest. Look for new color, softening, filled pods, mature seed, or other readiness signals. Then look for fresh damage. Check stems, branches, fruit surfaces, husks, seed heads, and the soil below. Compare what you see with the day before. Next, inspect the access routes. Run your eyes along the bottom of every net and cage. Check corners, posts, doors, clips, and places where the plant touches the barrier. Look above for branches, rails, and trellises that bypass the enclosure. Repair the easiest opening first. Then harvest what is truly ready. Do not postpone a ripe berry, mature bean, or appropriately ripening tomato simply because you planned a larger harvest later. Small, frequent harvests can protect more food than waiting for one perfect basket. After harvesting, remove obvious damaged pieces and close every opening you used. If a deterrent is part of the plan, change its position. If the same damage appears again, do not add random materials. Reconsider the suspect and the route. A failed defense is information. It tells you the visitor reached the crop another way. Return to the 3 clues from the beginning. The bitten tomato tells you to inspect the ripening zone and consider whether mature fruit should come indoors. The opened corn tells you to examine the ear, the husk, the stalk, and the surrounding tracks instead of judging the crop from a distance. The missing strawberries tell you to secure the low perimeter before the next red fruit appears. The payoff is not a garden that wildlife never visits. That promise would not be realistic. The payoff is a garden in which fewer ripe crops are left unprotected. Damage is noticed earlier, and the barrier matches the root. It is a basket containing tomatoes without bites, berries you picked before they vanished, beans collected from inside a closed enclosure, corn checked before the husks were opened, and sunflower seed heads protected during their final stage. You do not have to outsmart every bird, squirrel, or chipmunk in the neighborhood. You only have to notice the clue earlier, protect the right crop, and close the easiest path before the next visit. The next time a tomato is bitten or a berry disappears, do not see only the loss. Look at the stem, look below the plant, look at the height of the damage and the nearest root. Decide whether the crop needs a net, a cage, a bag, or a timely harvest. Once you know where to begin, the mystery becomes a practical problem, and practical problems can be managed.